Thank you, Diana. Good morning, everyone. This is a series that we hope will be helpful working with our media experts in bringing messaging, real-time messaging out to the community as this, not only the COVID-19 pandemic progresses through our community, but also the good news of vaccines on the front. I'm joined today by Dr. Paul Klotman, who's a president, CEO, and executive dean of Baylor College of Medicine, and Dr. Mark Boom, who's a president and CEO of Houston Methodist Hospital System. So just a few points before we move in. We have 5 vaccines that you're aware of: Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, J&J, and Novavax. Couple of points here that, as you're all well aware, that on Thursday when the FDA met, on Friday they gave emergency use authorization, and they'll be meeting later this week on Thursday to review the Moderna vaccine. So everything's moving quite quickly. We thought it would be really helpful to just kind of set the framework. There is 5,000 healthcare providers that have enrolled in Texas. We expect about 250,000 doses, and that will be shipped to 109 hospitals and 34 counties for Texas. And so for that, and obviously those are going first to the protecting our healthcare workers, our frontline workers, and protecting our vulnerable population. All TMC institutions have been registered and stand ready, and you're going to hear a great deal about the rollout of that from Dr. Mark Boom in a bit. We have 24 approved sites within the Texas Medical Center, and roughly we are getting 25% of the first week allocation. I remind you that first week allocation is actually rather small, and the volumes will grow in time. So I thought it'd be important first to turn to Dr. Paul Klotman to really talk more about the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine itself. So over to you, Dr. Klotman.
Okay, thank you. It's really kind of an amazing accomplishment to get a vaccine within a year. Things that took sometimes 5, 10, as long as 20 years to develop. And everyone is a little, I think, shocked by the speed of development. But I think it's not so surprising if you think about what's been going on scientifically. So the first thing is that the whole use of an mRNA platform has been under investigation for almost 30 years. And really around 20 years ago, scientists began to figure out how you could take mRNA and get it into cells, but it wasn't very efficient, or it was often broken down, didn't express a lot of protein. And then there were some great developments with liposome delivery mechanisms. And also advances in the mRNA itself, rather than using the traditional nucleotide structure, which is the way it appears in the body. They use a nucleoside, which is just the basic kind of building blocks of mRNA. So you had all this confluence of science, and both Moderna and BioN were leaders in this well before coronavirus ever happened. So they were already doing nucleoside mRNA chemistry and had liposomal delivery systems, and were doing a bunch of vaccines in other diseases, including flu, HIV, and a bunch of things. So combine that with the tremendous advances we've made in sequencing. Think about the start of the Human Genome Project, where we went from being able to, I remember doing a sequence, getting 50 nucleotides, running a Sanger gel in my lab all day long. And now you can get a sequence of a whole person, in a day. Well, all that technology is available, and the coronavirus sequence was available 2 weeks after the disease developed. And so when you're doing an mRNA vaccine, which is basically taking the very alphabet that produces proteins, it's extremely easy just to flip over the sequence from, I was doing flu, I'll just take the coronavirus spike protein and make that. So it wasn't a huge development process to come up with another vaccine using the same exact platform. And that's what happened with Moderna and BioN. They had that platform already going. And so it was very easy for them to put in the sequence of the spike protein and develop an effective vaccine. The second thing about speed is that it's really hard to do clinical trials when the disease is fairly rare. So, you have to wait sometimes years to finish a trial in looking at an anti-cholesterol drug or aspirin or something like that. It takes years and years and thousands of people. Well, when everybody around you is getting sick, it is really pretty easy to enroll 40,000, 50,000 people. Look at what's going on. We have 2,500 people getting sick every day in our own community. So it's extremely easy to enroll 40,000 people and get to your endpoints. And that's the other reason why everything happened so quickly. It was easy to make the vaccine based on just switching the sequence. There were so many people sick, it was easy to complete the clinical trials. Phase 1, 2 were almost done simultaneously, and phase 3 happened in a few months. And so and then the drug companies themselves said, we're not going to do this or even ask for emergency use authorization until they had 2 months of safety data. And it turns out the mRNA is incredibly effective. It does two really important things. It induces both your memory, your immunologic memory to react to the spike protein, and it also induces an antibody response. And all the side effects so far have been really the body responding. It's the immune response, you are responding, you get all this stuff released, all these cytokines released, and you get low-grade fever and achy wakey for a very short period of time. But that's your body telling you you're responding. And to have a 95% efficacy is really remarkable. In flu, you hope for 60%, 65%. So incredible advances on the mRNA front. Not surprised that they are the first ones in. The ones behind them are a little bit more complicated, and they use a viral vector. So you take a virus that's very common, it's empty, it's almost like a cargo ship, and you put the protein inside, and it induces an immune response that way. The problem with those vectors is that we've often seen that adenovirus as a kid, and so you have an immune response to the adenovirus in addition to the spike protein. So that may not give you as strong an immune response because you're generating immune response to two proteins rather than one. To counteract that, what they try to do is get an adenovirus we haven't seen. So in the case of J&J, they're looking at adenovirus 26, which is relatively rare in people, and so most people haven't seen it before. That's a good thing. You're not getting a booster response by just putting in that virus. And the other one is the AstraZeneca one, is actually one that's in chimpanzees. So hopefully, unless you're breeding chimpanzees at home, you haven't been exposed to that. So those are the two coming along. And then the other one that's starting is Novavax, which is basically just taking the protein itself synthesized and putting that in a nanoparticle with a bunch of spike proteins around it, highly immunogenic. It's with an adjuvant. An adjuvant is something that stimulates you to have a more immune response. The mRNA itself in the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine and BioNTech vaccine is the adjuvant. In this case, it takes something else. And there will be many other. There's so many in development right now. From killed virus is being developed in China and in Russia. Our own Peter Hotez has a protein with an adjuvant one going on in India. And again, there's so much disease out there. It'll be pretty easy to get these phase 3 trials completed. And I expect very soon to have many, many vaccines available. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about them.
Thank you, Dr. Klotman. Let me turn to Dr. Boom. We've heard about the complexities of how you take how when receiving the Pfizer vaccine, the conditions it has to be maintained. How do you handle distribution across, particularly you run one of the largest systems in Texas. How do you really disperse that out carefully? Can you walk us through the tremendous amount of preparations that you and your team have been making for some time?
Certainly. Thanks, Bill. And I do want to reiterate that it is a tremendous amount of preparation. And we literally have 6 or 7 teams at any given time focusing on different aspects of the whole delivery chain and the logistics of doing this to sort this out. And we've been preparing for quite some time. And I want to thank all of those individuals for hard work and for what looks like it should be a very smooth and well thought out process. As Bill mentioned, and we've all heard this obviously in the press, this vaccine from Pfizer BioNTech requires very deep cold storage, minus 70 degrees Celsius. The Moderna, which we hope to come out in a week, does not require quite as cold a temperature, so that will be easier. And some of the others that Dr. Klotman was talking about, we would expect would require even less. So there are some significant logistics, and that's one of the reasons why you're seeing a limited number of hospitals around the country and in Texas get this in the first week here is to actually sort out some of those details. And because there are a number of very large, distributed, sophisticated systems like ours and like others that are based in the Texas Medical Center who have that cold storage ability really at baseline. So what we know right now is that tomorrow we should receive the first part of our week 1 allotment. And let me start by saying this is all shifting information literally sometimes several times a day for us over the last couple of weeks. So we've been informed across our hospital system 13,650 doses will be our first week allotment. Put that in perspective between our employees and our affiliated physicians. We're in the 32,000 individuals basis. So when you start thinking about how do we vaccinate the very front lines, that 13,650 actually will do a very good job for us at getting into a pretty good proportion of our staff. Now, what we'll receive tomorrow is the main hospital, our academic flagship hospital allotment, which is 5,850 doses. And then hopefully over the course of the next few days, we receive the other 8,000 or so doses that we are expecting. We would expect tomorrow to vaccinate a couple hundred people. We've been preparing starting Wednesday to vaccinate, not knowing when we would get the supply. It's turning out to be approximately when we thought. We thought it might be late in the day, Tuesday. Now it looks earlier in the day. So Wednesday, we will start full force. We can do 2,100 a day. So really with what comes in the next day, we're able to get to every one of those 5,850 doses really by sometime Friday. And so we're hoping that the rest comes in so we can continue to vaccinate. The process is relatively straightforward, but there's a lot of details. We will have people vaccinated every 5 minutes, but over the last couple of days, advice came out or guidance came out from the CDC on some observation time after shots are received. So everybody needs to be observed for 15 minutes and a limited number of people may need to be observed for 30 minutes. That actually adds to the complexity. So we're sorting all of those things out, but we're excited to be able to get those workers vaccinated. So let me explain a little bit about how we prioritize. And I know how other partner institutions across the Texas Medical Center in the state are doing as well. We literally created a tiering system within our own institution, a relatively small group of tier 1, which, when we didn't know how much we would get was if we get a very limited supply, these are the people who are in a room, very, very high level of exposures to COVID. And that's a relatively small number out of 30,000, but it's a very large number given that we have 30,000 people. And then really the bulk of our physicians, nurses, others fall into tier 2. So our strong hope is we will get all of our tier 1 and tier 2 individuals vaccinated very rapidly. That is obviously something that gives us a great deal of optimism going forward. We're also working with a number of outside entities for towards the end of week 1 as we get into that last part of our allotment, or perhaps in week 2. So some of the fire departments, Fort Bend, Houston Fire Department, we're working with a lot of home health agencies. That's a very critical group because, of course, if you think about a home health nurse, he or she is going into a patient's home who is already by definition ill and vulnerable, and in many cases, very high-risk individuals. So that will be a very important group, and many other community partners as well as we work through the next few weeks' supply. As soon as we're given the authorization, our goal is to get to higher risk patients as well. We've created our own tiering system as well that will adapt based on governmental guidance over time. But at the present time, really, when we look at the highest risk group, which are people who are older as well as have a couple health problems, just in our databases, that's about 70,000 people. So we'll be pushing to get people immunized at higher risk as soon as we possibly can. I think that will most likely, if we get the kinds of supply that we're being told we should expect, be around the turn of the year. So really around New Year's, that first week in January, we hope to be getting to patients. But again, all of that depends on the supply coming to us, which has been a shifting target and one which we're expecting will continue to be a shifting target as this is complex. And we're talking about every state and every region in the union. So.